All right, hi everyone. I'm Andrew, aka Queer Professor Mindgasms, for the purposes of this video, and I'm going to do my next one in my series on the book by the former mathematician and professional mangler of philosophy, James Lindsay, of course, who I criticize all the time, along with Helen Pluckrose, and talk specifically about their book, chapter 4 of their book called Cynical Theories, which is supposedly criticizing basically the variety, what they think are the variety of different so-called critical theories in higher education. So I'm going to talk about chapter 4, in which they're talking about basically making the claim that queer theory is postmodernist and just mangling postmodernism as usual. So I'm going to talk about my notes on chapter 4, and then go into this video of James Lindsay's, in which he's talking about how queer theory is literally Maoist. So it's the standard ridiculous bullshit from James Lindsay, basically, and Helen Pluckrose, basically all the way through the Cynical Theories books, which is just like academic fraud, in my opinion. Anyway, so I'm going to get into my notes here first, and then we'll go to that video. Okay, so chapter 4. Okay, the first claim here that they make is that queer theory derives directly from postmodernism. Obviously, this is a fucking ridiculous claim. And queer theory is just like, at the most, at the worst, it's activism based on dumbass, incorrect Marxist misinterpretations of the so-called Marxists in the Frankfurt School. And so, yeah, I'm just going to keep going through this. So, okay, the next claim is that queer theory disregards biology in the social construction of gender and claims that it's less important than all other factors. So, of course, they like totally miss the point of what social construction actually means, as most critics of this term usually do. So, what the point that they're missing is that gender is socially constructed like any other concept. This merely means that all concepts are multifactorial, all of which should be thoroughly analyzed, none of which should be considered the most superior or as the only important factor, right? They're just talking about how this, when someone's talking about social construction, they're talking about how we as a society decided that this is a topic, rather, or a category that we're going to create. There's no one saying that this therefore means that biology has nothing to do with gender. Okay, so so they also invent a new term as they keep doing. They use this term called postmodern political principle. Again, drawing this totally fictional connection to so-called postmodernism. So there's no such thing as postmodern political principle. That's the term that they totally fucking invent that means nothing. And absolute. So also, they also make the claim that so-called postmodernists like Derrida and Foucault argue that society is constructed by unjust systems of power. And neither of them, it's sure as fuck the case that neither of them, like Foucault or Derrida or pretty much any other so-called postmodernist, would claim that society is constructed by unjust systems of power. That's also, as usual, just totally missing the point of what Foucault talks about when he talks about power. So Absolutely zero so-called postmodernists argue that society is constructed by unjust systems of power. In fact, a few who are considered the original so-called postmodernists, even though they rejected this label, like Derrida and Foucault, explicitly refuted the claim that society is constructed by unjust systems of power. In fact, a few who are considered the original uh, oh wait, I'm reading the same sentence twice in a row here. Okay. Foucault, in particular, wrote in his book called The History of Sexuality, Part 1, that I've been doing a long series on, so you should check that out if you haven't done so already. If you like my philosophical deep dives like this. Anyway, in A History of Sexuality, Part 1, Foucault says that systems of power are not inherently unjust. I'm pretty sure actually that's a verbatim quote from the book, that systems of power are not inherently unjust. It's more that he looks at them like they're tools, really. If you actually carefully read that book or anything else that he says about power, it's much more nuanced than that. Whether a system of power is just depends on who has the power and how they are using it. A person with bad intentions who deliberately uses power to oppress or persecute people is unjust. But a system, and so, but this isn't Foucault saying here. This is what I'm saying. Um, basically, but this is basically the message that Foucault is expressing in History of Sexuality, but in like a verbose and academic way, as he tends to often do, right? And because he has that writing style. Anyway, so whether a system of power is just depends on who has the power and how they are using it. A person with bad intentions who deliberately uses power to oppress or persecute people is unjust, but a system of power can certainly be justified. I think Foucault and Derrida would both wholeheartedly agree with that. That uh, that a system of power can certainly possibly be justified. There can be just systems of power. Also, so the next ridiculous claim that they make is that queer theory does not value logic. That doesn't make any sense. Like, but obviously, you're just disagreeing with their worldview and their arguments by saying that. Um, no, wait. So they specifically say queer theory specifically values illogic, the opposite of logic. Yeah, not true, bro. So also they claim that they make this claim that they say that the homosexuality being a social construct denies the scientific fact that it is also biological. But obviously, that shows that, as per usual, James Lindsay and Helen Pluckrose don't even actually understand what social construction actually means or what a social construct actually is. Because, like I said before, something being a gender, for example, being a social construct does not deny the fact that there are biological aspects to gender, but gender is more specifically your sex, right? Like whether you're male or female. Gender is how you like present yourself culturally in society. So they're definitely like but even if you think that gender is biological, like someone who thinks that homosexuality in this example is a social construct, they don't deny that there are biological aspects to homosexuality. Like Foucault, I don't think he ever specifically said that homosexuality is a social construct, but he probably would agree with that claim. But he would never have ever have said that whether you're homosexual or heterosexual has nothing to do with your biology. That's like one of the three major aspects of it, I would say, along with what he might say are religious aspects of that concept and political aspects of that concept. I think he would probably say that. Anyway, I'm going to get into this video now. Since I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to correct the false claims that queer theory has anything to do with postmodernism. And now I'm going to get into the false claim in his video here that critical race theory and queer theory are woke and Maoist and, this usual bullshit basically here. So let's go into this video, and I'm going to criticize it as I usually do. Okay.
Hi there, this is James Lindsay. You are listening to New Discourses Bullets, where I give a bullet point summary of a topic to help you understand what's going on with the woke movement, woke Marxism, I should say, in our world. Today, I want to...
Okay, already not a real thing. This thing called woke Marxism is something that he specifically totally fucking invented, and I think that's what he called... No, I think his next book that I don't know whether it's out or is about to come out soon. I think it's called Race Marxism, another concept that he totally fucking invented and has nothing whatsoever to do with reality. Here we go.
To illustrate for you just quickly and simply a very important topic, which is how we have the woke reproduce Maoism, particularly in our schools in education.
Okay, guess what? Guess what? The wokeness does not actually literally produce Maoism. Surprise, surprise, he's fucking wrong about that. Spoiler alert.
It's actually brought in as a portion of, or really the operative part of,
Oops.
Whether it's social and emotional learning of the transformative type, or whether it's culturally responsive or culturally relevant teaching or education or pedagogy. They're actually reproducing Maoism. Ethnic studies is probably doing this as well to a degree.
No, they're not producing Maoism. Again, he hasn't said any reason or listed any particular evidence for why they're specifically producing Maoism yet. And now he's talking about that being in race studies, which in which he goes on to include critical race theory, which he also falsely does because he acts as if anything has the word race, it's all the same thing, even though, and as I've explained many, many, many times before, anti-racism and critical race theory are two very different things, and some critical race theorists are very in opposition to anti-racists, some anti-racists and vice versa, and there are disagreements among specific anti-racists and specific critical race theorists too, as I explained ad nauseum. Anyway, let's keep going here.
Degree, it's a little bit different, but woke education in general is reproducing Maoism in our schools, and it's very important to understand what's going on with Maoism. Now, if you want a further deeper dive on this, then I'm going to offer in this short little bullet point summary here, I encourage you to go listen to a podcast on the New Discourses podcast called Groomer Schools 3.
Again, this is where he draws this totally fucking fictional connection to woke education and grooming, literally like grooming, often grooming, like in elementary schools he talks about grooming children to be trans, like pedophile woke professors are apparently also pedophile grooming people to be trans. Oh yeah, I don't need my glasses on when I'm not reading. Makes me look nerdier though. Anyway, yeah, none of these woke professors are fucking are pedophile grooming children to be trans, and neither are they grooming adults to be trans, or just grooming them in any way, shape, or form for any reason, even if it has absolutely nothing to do with trans people, which he again demonizes by adding this totally fictional Alex Jones style technical academic conspiracy apparatus that's all connected to wokeness and critical race theory and Marxism and trying to take over the world to engineer the Chinese social credit system so that the rich people of the World Economic Forum can own everything, or some fucking massively goddamn fucking crazy conspiracy bullshit. Anyway.
Turns out I did a short series called Groomer Schools. There are 3 of them. I recommend everybody that's interested in understanding what's happening in education listen to all 3 of those. The third one is going to cover in greater detail what I'm summarizing here in a quick digestible
I've thoroughly studied how the woke professors are groomers
form. So here's how it worked. Mao Zedong That's, of course, the communist dictator of China in the 1960s and 70s, but also really in the early 50s as well. He got deposed from power and brought back or it came back, I should say, in 1966, and at which point he installed the Cultural Revolution, used a program that pushed young people into becoming what he called the Red Guard, which was a revolutionary Marxist guard in the student movement.
Okay, so far he's just saying what Mao did. Yep, what Mao did was generally extremely fucked up. He's probably one of the most genocidal dictators in human history, if not the most. Who knows? Maybe Genghis Khan was a lot worse in terms of his body count, but Mao killed more people than Stalin and more people than Hitler. So he killed a lot of fucking people and did some awful shit for sure. But again, he's not he still hasn't even connected this to wokeness directly in any way, shape, or form.
Radicalized university students, college students, high school students, and elementary school students at various ways and various levels, and they became the primary change agents, if you will, for the society that he was trying to create, that basically built and entrenched his power. What the Red Guard did was they went and destroyed the four olds. In other words, they severed the current culture from all previous culture, previous identity, previous everything. So the four olds that they destroyed were old culture, old customs, old habits, and old ways of thinking. Those all had to be destroyed. And so this would mean that the Red Guard would go out and they would tear down statues.
Yeah, guess what? Mao bad.
Choose to tear down the old culture. They would invade temples and destroy them from the inside out. They would come home and beat their parents or grandparents, or rat them out, or turn them into the authorities, or publicly shame them in struggle sessions, make them wear dunce caps, make them march through the cities. They would beat their teachers and professors who didn't get on board with the revolutionary ideology, or publicly shame them and put them in these struggle session situations. They would go around to the old Chinese medicine or the Chinese martial arts people and beat and shame them for holding up elements of old backwards culture that the communists wanted to get rid of. So religion, family, nation, all of these ideas had to be destroyed. Old ideas had to be destroyed, and the Red Guard were the ones who do it. So how did you make the Red Guard? And that's the relevant question. We already see, by the way, many of those things happening. We've seen the move away from religion. We see the insulting.
We see the move away from religion, but there aren't woke people like going around demanding that people don't practice their religion. This has nothing to do with fucking Maoism. It's the cultural change. It's the culture changing, like how Nietzsche talked about the death of the old gods, right? The old gods are dead and we have killed them. He just meant that society was becoming more secular, and it would be our religious nature would be replaced by something else, which it has by politics, but that has nothing to do with wokeness deliberately engineering that into fucking society. Like, that's fucking bullshit.
Rampant insulting of Christianity in the United States and the West. We see
I thought you were a free speech guy. Like, what's wrong with insulting religion? You should be for that if you're for freedom of speech.
Down of statuary. We see, getting rid of the old songs. We have two national anthems apparently now. We have to get rid of the old national anthem. We have a black national anthem too on the wake of Black Lives Matter.
Is that official? I'm not so sure that's an official national anthem. Maybe it is, and that's bad if it is. But if it's just for specifically crazy Black Lives Matter people, then why do you care?
We have to rethink and reimagine how we're going to reorganize everything in society, like you name it. So how do you create a Red Guard? Well, here's how Mao did it. Mao created 10 different identity categories. He called.
Okay, keep in mind, no one is creating a Maoist Red Guard in woke universities now. Or I should say woke professors. I don't think any actual entire universities are woke.
5 of them black, and that was for bad or fascist, and he called 5 of them red, and that was for good or communist. And the Red Guard were selected from the red identity categories. The black identity categories he labeled were things, well, the 5 that he named were rich farmer, landlord, counter-revolutionary, bad influences, and right-wingers. And then the good ones were things like peasant and laborer and
Keep in mind, this is still just stuff that Mao did.
revolutionary and activist and things like that. And so the goal was to take as many people as you could and associate them one way or another with a bad identity to create a social pressure that was easiest to affect in children to move them into a good identity. So you want to make people think of themselves.
So if he's going to say that people created these categories in order to demonize people, you could argue that, well, like woke people do the opposite of that. They say they invent all these fucking 100 genders or whatever he says it is. But like a lot of woke people definitely demonize conservatives, but conservatives demonize woke people too. Like that's not a different thing. Tribal people of any kind do that. And like Foucault also talked about in terms of postmodernism as an example I've listed many times before is that he talked about how the creation of the category of homosexuality was it was done by the institution of religion and the church in order to label it as a sin, and done by the institution of science in order to label homosexuality as a medical flaw, and it was done by the government in order to make homosexuality illegal. So, postmodernists and are not inherently pro the creation of categories. That's why there's this false connection between postmodernism and wokeness. But I'm again, he's just talking about what Mao did here, and that people are tribal. Again, no evidence whatsoever of any actual Maoism and wokeness.
They call this, if you want to read How to Have Impossible Conversations, we talk about this in there. It's called altercast.
That's ironic because I've said before that his only work that I like is his book with Peter Boghossian called How to Have Impossible Conversations, and he never follows his own advice in that. He's just a dick all day long to woke people on Twitter, and he has nice conversations with people that agree to him, but he's a total dick to everyone on Twitter who's talking with him, and never following his own advice of trying to have constructive conversations and being just as tribal and demonizing woke people just as much as they probably demonize him.
Casting, you put somebody in a alternate psychological or social role and get them, they will actually try to adhere to that. You want to get them in these good social identities as defined by the people in power, Mao in this case, and you shame them out of the bad ones, which is not part of altercasting, by the way. In altercasting, you get somebody to live up to a particular image of themselves. It's a marketing technique.
See, another example of how he does not follow his own advice and how to have impossible conversations.
But at any rate, what you would do is you take a kid in school. Well, first you create a condition in school where the kids who have the good identities get special treatment. Maybe it's better lunches. Maybe they get to wear special clothes. Maybe they get to lord over the other kids. Maybe
hypothetical still hasn't listed any examples of this actually happening.
They get extra recess, something desirable to children. In general, they get better treatment in one way or another, and the kids who don't get that, and they get excluded from it, and they get treated badly, and they have to go to like different kinds of lessons or whatever you might imagine. And then you try to associate kids with bad identities unless they're already basically red guard worthy, and only red identities could become red guard, which was then considered honored. And so you create
still just talking about what Mao did.
Social pressure to shift. And so if somebody is the son of a landlord or a farmer who's doing well, a kulak in the Soviet language or the Soviet construction, then you shame those kids. You may even you label them with their black identity. Your parents are right wing. They have conservative ideas. So you have to have this black identity and we're going to mistreat you. So that's why they're going to go home and beat their parents and grandparents, for example, because their parents are the ones that have the wrong ideas. So they get unfair treatment at school because of something somebody else is doing. So just rat them out and we'll make you a revolutionary. And then you have a red identity and you get the special treatment. And so imagine if you could create a situation where you're talking to kids constantly about identity factors, where some of them are made good and some of them are made bad. So you talk to them about race.
This is really boring. I'm just not as interested in his bullshit as I used to be, I think.
Using critical race theory, and you say how they're all complicit, no matter what their race, but especially if they're white or white adjacent, in upholding white supremacy. And that makes them bad. It makes them racist. It makes them uphold a oppressive system that hurts lots of people, and think of how emotional that can get and how not fair that is, and they're complicit in part of that, but they can become an ally, which is a red identity now. Or you tell them that, if maybe they're a racial minority, they don't have to become an ally. They need to become politically black or politically brown. They have to become, as Ayanna Pressley put it, a black face who wants to be a black voice instead of a black face who doesn't want to.
See how he randomly now but like literally totally fucking randomly switch from talking about Maoism to critical race theory without even mentioning that he's talking about critical race theory. Like one has totally nothing whatsoever to do with the other.
Be a black voice, which she said, we don't want any more of those things. So you can move people into allyship and political solidarity. Being in solidarity constitutes a red identity. Politically black, red identity. And then with the poor allies, though, you tell them that it never really works, right? You're never really good enough. You just became an ally to make yourself look good. You became a good white, if they're a white kid, for example. You're trying to escape your work. You have white fragility. You're trying to escape your racial work. You're actually doing your allyship wrong. You're speaking over and for people. Your allyship is actually reinforcing your privilege. So your allyship is done wrong. So you have to be an even better ally constantly. But by the way, you could also, not just using critical race theory, you could also use queer theory and gender theory, and you could become bisexual or you could become demisexual.
Now he's talking basically lumping all three of these things into the same category, like queer theory, gender theory, and critical race theory, even though critical race theory has fucking nothing to do with queer theory, unless you're talking about intersectionalists who do intersectionality, and that is like the woke shit, but it's not even critical race theory. That's basically anti-racism, which, as I've said many times before, is different in a lot of ways.
You could become pansexual, or something that even harder to understand for previous generations. You can explore your romantic, all this kind of self-indulgent, narcissistic navel gazing about sex, sexuality, gender identity, etc. And your romantic identity, your sexual identity, your gender identity, you could transition. And now, if you're politically queer in one way or another, then you also have a red identity. You don't even have to just be an ally. And then other people have to be an ally with you. And the solidarity reinforces. So with critical race theory on the one hand and queer theory on the other, or gender theory, whichever one you want, combining together within the context of, say, a delivery mechanism like social emotional learning or ethnic studies or liberatory education.
He always drawing all of these fucking totally false connections between a whole bunch of different realms of admittedly woke study, of course, some of that, like queer theory or whatever, but like a lot of these have little to nothing to do with each other. I mean, of course, gender theory and queer theory have something to do with each other, but they have nothing to do with critical race theory. And critical race theory and anti-racism are different. And then he's just lumping all three of these into like no more than three of these into the same category.
Or culturally responsive or relevant or sustaining teaching. Any of these programs are putting in everywhere. You can create these exact pathways. You're a racist, but you could become an ally. You're upholding white supremacy, but you could become politically black. You are complicit in these systems of oppression, but you could transition and become politically queer. And so you can create this exact same Maoist pressure to create the exact same kind of red guard. And what is the red guard going to do? It's going to,
again, all of this shit is fucking hypothetical that he's saying now too.
Separate from the previous generation. How? You come home and you say, I'm whatever sexuality, whatever. I'm a political activist. Your parents try to correct you, and you say things have changed. You don't understand. You have it wrong. I was a bad identity because I was raised by you, and you sever from family. Our country's had it wrong. Our country's been bad all along, and you sever from nation. Religion is backwards. It's been wrong, and you sever from church. You sever from faith. You sever from religion. And the entire
He's still not even saying who does this or who has done this.
Olds of culture can be taken down, and you have a whole pot of activists ready to go tear down statues of Thomas Jefferson, ready to turn in and shame their parents, just like under Mao. Why are we seeing in America and in Canada and throughout the West things that happened exactly in Maoist?
Yeah, some people want to take statues down, but not all of them are like super woke people, and not all of them want to take down every statue you say they do, like Thomas Jefferson. Some of them want to take down other statues, but not that one. Some of them want to take down that statue and not other ones. Like, I think it depends on the statue. To me, if you have a statue of a really terrible person, I think be I could be convinced to take that down, but it depends on the statue, which, you know, I don't think you necessarily have to be for or against that across the board. Like, who cares?
China during his Cultural Revolution, because the exact same mechanism is happening in our schools, and it's being installed there deliberately, and it's being installed there because it works. It's not just stupid stuff. It's not just indoctrination.
Evidence required there, bro.
It is a political program to radicalize the youth, to separate them from the previous culture. So you have to ask yourself if you have any power.
Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
Or to change anything that's happening in schools, including whether or not your children attend them. Do you want to have them participate in this? Do you want your child to be cannon fodder in this movement? Do you want your state or your nation's children to be cannon fodder in this?
See how he's getting all fucking Alex Jones conspiratorial here, but talking in a calmer voice than Alex Jones? Do you want all these terrible things to happen? The black helicopters are coming for your kids.
Revolution for these identity-based Marxists, because this is what they're doing, and this is how it works.
Marxists. Again, Marxism don't talk about like identity specifically. They talk about class. And just because people talk about identity, conflating that with Marxism makes no sense whatsoever. They're Marxists, and then they're woke people obsessed with identity politics, and then some of those people are also Marxists, but the Marxist aspect has nothing to do with identity politics, because Marx didn't even fucking talk about identity politics. Like, that shit's ridiculous.
Identity Marxism becomes identity Maoism under these applications in the schools. And so we're seeing the playing out of a cultural revolution in the United States, in Canada, and throughout the West, very similar to the Cultural Revolution in China, because it's the exact same tools targeting the exact same audiences. The only thing that's different is it's not old school communist identities where it's rich people versus poor people. And right-wingers versus the revolutionaries. Now it's right-wingers versus revolutionaries and various identity politics factors versus others. And so now you can understand what's really
No, that's not true.
Happening in the schools, and why it's so important that we get the woke DEI-based stuff out of schools. DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that we get very strict on programs.
Again, he's this like freedom of speech guy, but he wants to cancel many entire programs in schools that, I mean, like I said, many of which are admittedly woke, but they're not harmful. Like I've said many times before, I took one that really sounded really woke, and it was exactly what I expected. But because I'm not an idiot, I didn't start believing that shit. So you should be allowed to teach even ridiculous shit. Because I'm pretty pro free speech, so that's what I believe. So, like, he's way too afraid of this shit. It's only dumb woke people who are actually believing it. It's just fucking ridiculous. Alex Jones paranoia shit.
Social and emotional learning that are facilitating it.
All right. So, yeah. I know that was long, but, you know, my philosophical deep dives tend to be longer. So, I hope you appreciated that. Just my responses and notes to chapter 4 of James Lindsay and Helen Pluckrose's Cynical Theories, why they are drawing this completely fucking fictional connection between postmodernism and queer theory, and James Lindsay's video there, in which he's making the totally fictional claim that queer theory is Maoist, and all of this other shit about wokeness that is also totally false. So anyway, yeah, share this everywhere with your friends. Check out my last philosophical deep dive, which is my latest one in my series on Foucault's History of Sexuality, which I mentioned. And look forward to my future videos. Going to do a podcast with Dusty about one of Tolkien's stories that was part, and there was part of it in the Silmarillion, but it's a full story that was published posthumously by his friend Christopher Tolkien, which is about Turin of Turambar slaying Glaurung dragon, and also meeting someone that ends up in an incestuous situation. So check that out. That takes place in the first stage of Middle Earth, a long time before Lord of the Rings. And yeah, check out any future videos. Click that bell to be notified when I come out with new videos. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Share this everywhere, and check out my Patreon page. The link is in the description of this video as always. And like I always say, the funk cures all, and groove is in the heart. And remember, James Lindsay does not know what the fuck he is talking about when he's talking about philosophy and all of these all of these terms he invented, like wokeism and race Marxism and any other kind of Marxism, like gender Marxism, slinky Marxism, spoon Marxism, anything that he can attach the label Marxism to. Anyway, yeah, James Lindsay is wrong about all this shit, like critical race theory, gender theory, postmodernism, wokeness, any number of other realms of philosophy that he mangles over and over and over again, and specific philosophers that he mangles over and over and over again. And yeah, so thanks everyone for watching. Share this with all your James Lindsay fans and show them how wrong he is. And thanks again everyone for watching, and adios until next time.